Guten Morgen, meine sehr
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the presentation of our figures for the first half year of 2017. First, a few comments on the macroeconomic development in our region. Things are looking up everywhere, also in Austria and in Croatia, where in the first quarter things were slightly off, but at the moment they are profiting from the situation in the other southeastern region countries, Greece and Turkey. In all our countries, economic growth has been okay. Also, Austria is looking up. And it doesn't look too bad at the public debt ratios. All countries are moving within the Maastricht limit, with the exception of Romania, and public debt is going down, is declining with the present interest rates, of course, that has to go down, but nevertheless, we have to be happy that the citizens are not that much burdened by public debt. In some countries, public debt is particularly low. At the moment, if I look at our region, I would say the Czech Republic has performed very well. It has real growth rates. A lot is being invested in the industry sector. A lot of small and medium-sized enterprises are coming up, and domestically, infrastructure investments are moving up, and the economic environment is excellent. The inflation rate has increased, real wages are increasing, real estate prices are going up, and the Czech National Bank has reacted to this. After 10 years now, the benchmark interest rate was raised by 20 basis points. We have a lot of deposits, and the loan-to-deposit ratio is around 70. And that, of course, helps us. Public debt in the Czech Republic is very low indeed, and they have practically no budget deficit. Austria is also looking up. Slovakia is lagging behind here, but is also doing quite well. And Hungary also seems to recover. Romania, here the situation is less positive because growth is not driven by investments but by consumption, particularly because wages in the government sector and in the close to government sector are being increased. So the low public debt is a blessing, but if the deficit keeps going on, then the situation may change very quickly. The employment rate is going up everywhere. In the Czech Republic, we have overemployment, and this, of course, impacts the income situation. And in all countries, employment levels are rising. So the picture is quite positive. As to interest rates, not much to be said about this, because the benchmark interest rate in the Czech Republic was raised, and all the rest is in the long term. What about us? In the first quarter, we had customer loans above average due to the fact that in the first quarter, in connection with the expected revaluation of the Czech crown, a lot of speculative money entered the market. So it was not genuine loan growth, but nevertheless we have a two-digit loan growth in the Czech Republic. And in all other countries, customer loans have risen above average, and also an increasing deposit growth. Over 14 billion deposits have been gained in 1 year, which is quite dramatic. Unfortunately, we do not have enough options to invest these deposits in products that are fairly safe and domestic, where higher yield can be generated. So the motor behind this, that investment of the domestic industry also leads to investment for the domestic investors. This does not work, unfortunately, in our region. And we hope that the next government will devote itself to this subject, not only here, but also in other countries, mind you. So in all, we can be very happy with our growth. If you look at the loan growth, we have mortgages, we extended mortgages at 3.5 billion. Retail deposits, 9 billion came from private customers. Growth in asset management is rather modest. Just imagine what assets we could produce for all the people in which we work if we could offer them 2.5%, 3% in terms of yield. So that they could participate in the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises in our region. So the growth in asset management is okay, but I'm still missing a zero there. And it will take quite some time until we finally get there. And this means I hand over to the corporate customers.
Good morning also from my part. We do have positive economic developments in the region that have led to a positive development in our corporate business. We've grown more strongly than the region on average. That means we've won market shares from competitors in most of our countries. The average lending growth on an annualized basis was 5%. In absolute figures, this means that 1.2 billion new loans were originated to corporate customers, and the loan portfolio has a volume of 46.2 billion. One thing is very positive indeed. The changing behavior and the changing atmosphere, consumer confidence and also confidence of companies has increased, and that has led to more credit, more loan approvals compared to the past when hardly any applications were received for loans for capital expenditure, or if such applications were received, that was on a very short-term basis. Now, in our new business, we've been able to originate more than 50% investment credit, 30% was funding for working capital, and financing for mergers and acquisitions also accounted for a substantial part. Here you can see the structure of our portfolio. Raw materials and energy, followed by real estate, are still the biggest components. Loan growth was strongest in automotive and transportation. Currently, in the region, we are servicing approximately 100,000 corporate customers. 75% of them are SMEs, which account for 15% of employees in the private sector in the region, and that is a good basis for our business. So overall, we did see a very positive development in the first half of the year. We won additional SME customers, the strongest growth in Austria, followed by the Czech Republic and Slovakia. So, good morning also from my part. I'd like to move on to operating income and expenses. As you can see, operating income has declined by 0.7% in the first half of the year. This is a rather sound and solid result given the low interest requirement, because every year, because of maturing securities investments, we generate 80 to 140 million less income from our own issues, because reinvestment at current interest levels is not something that generates income for customers. We were able to almost offset this negative effect through customer business in the corporate segment and the retail segment, and we also generated a positive fee and commission income. So a decline in operating income by 0.7% is indeed better than we had expected for the first half of the year. We are just under 3.3 billion. As regards operating expenses, we saw a slight increase by 1.2%. That is 24 million, driven by investments in IT, and amortization also is mainly accounted for by IT. And then regulatory requirements increased in recent years. We're involved in major projects which, as of the 1st of January 2018 and in subsequent years, will go live. And that means that depreciation and amortization remains high, or will continue to increase slightly, and other operating expenses will also remain high. Personnel expenses are stable. This is a positive development, although given the excellent economic development in a number of countries, we do see wage and salary increases which are higher than our targets, but we have been able to make up for that through savings in other areas. As regards our operating result and the cost-income ratio, now the operating result went down slightly and the cost-income ratio increased to 60.8%. The second quarter showed a much better result than the first quarter. In the first quarter, we were above 60%. In the second quarter, we have dropped to below 60%. And as you can see, developments in different countries are quite diverging. A positive development in Austria, slightly negative development in the Czech Republic, positive in Hungary and Serbia, slightly negative in Slovakia. This is due to the major refinancing activities in the second quarter of last year in Slovakia, where on account of new legislation, a refinancing wave hit the market, particularly as regards mortgage loans. And with this, I hand over to Mr. Czanko, who will speak about risk costs. So good morning. Development of risk costs. Yes, we are still operating at a very favorable level, and there are no indications of major changes. This holds for Austria and all the markets we operate in, with a single exception, that is Croatia, but this is due to a single default. Apart from that, we can see a very positive development of risk costs, and we take it that this development is going to continue. As regards non-performing loans, again, except for that single case in Croatia, we have a declining NPL volume. The NPL ratio is improving, and the NPL coverage ratio is excellent. You will remember that in 2016, we were able to sell a substantial amount of non-performing loans. That has gone down. It will remain an issue, but at a low level. Altogether, in the first half of 2017, we were able to sell approximately 200 million in NPL. And in the medium term, we're going to come closer to the 3% mark. So, back to Mr. Treichel. A few words about the net profit. A decline compared to the first 6 months of 2016. We're just above 600 million. Last year it was above 800 million. We had the Visa sale last year, 140 million. Unfortunately, you can sell things only once. And risk costs were even lower in the first half of 2016 than this year. In the course of the year, we saw an improvement. The second quarter was better than the first quarter. The cost-income ratio was down to 58 and no longer above 60. And we saw an increase from 260 to 360 million through higher earnings and improved cost situation. Well, that's it, more or less. As regards capital, according to Basel III fully loaded, we stand at 12.8%. Our regulatory capital is almost 20 billion. And with all our capital ratios, we are quite satisfied, despite a significant increase because of lending growth and also operational growth. That means our risk-weighted assets have gone up as well. When you look at capital ratios, starting in 2008, we were just over 5% in 2008. Now we're approaching the 13% mark, so it's a considerable growth. Well, we'll have to wait and see what the regulator expects from us. But I think in regulatory terms, well, we shouldn't talk about caps and floors today, but We should at one point in, they should at one point in time set an upper limit. Our outlook for this year, 10% return on tangible equity plus, a somewhat bigger plus, bigger than 3 months ago, because things are looking up everywhere compared to the beginning of the year. So we do see a slightly positive trend for the full year 2017. And we hope that at one point in time, interest rates will go up also in the euro area. So thank you for your attention, and we're willing to take your questions. We may not be able to answer all your questions.
Everything is being securitized. Everything has been considered. I don't think that any provisions are necessary. If you want to have a figure, we don't say the figure, but just look at Croatia and the risk costs, and then you know exactly where we stand. As to Croatia, what happened there? Well, it's just a unique case, and the media reported on this in extenso. A large group that was highly relevant for the Croatian system is being restructured at the moment. The first phase has been a success, as far as I know, and now the restructuring has to continue. The conditions are there, and there is every reason to be optimistic about this. You said that the savings should be invested in other products. The government is challenged here. What are your expectations? Well, we don't have to compare Europe and the United States here, because America has a much, much better capital market than Europe. But if you look at Europe as such, there are some countries that have a very good capital market, and thus for pension funds, for social insurances, for life insurances, for private investors, there are ample opportunities to invest either direct or via the pension funds. And thus they can participate in the growth of the economy in this country. In Austria, on the other hand, we have an underdeveloped capital market, and the politicians over decades had a very strange relation to investment in shares. And this is the reason why we have very, very few options to have our customers participate in the growth of the economy. It's the same in Slovakia and the Czech Republic. And needless to say, you cannot bring about a turnaround by saying we set up a few venture capital funds or startups. These are all amounting to just a few million. What we would have to develop is a capital market culture in this country, which would necessitate that a government, a future government, which will devote itself to transparency, to taxes, to the tax situation, and will see to it that we create options for entrepreneurs to raise capital, which then in legal and tax terms, is designed in such a way that it's attractive for pension funds and private investors to participate in this. Well, it's a major undertaking, but it's absolutely necessary, I think. Otherwise, we'll be lagging behind in creating prosperity for our citizens. And we should not be surprised that real estate prices are going up and up. And this is a very unhealthy development, mind you, because real estate loans have very low interest rates, but because of the strong growth, there are more and more guarantee laws, and young people are no longer in a position to satisfy this need to have enough securities, and so only the rich will profit from this. Well, I will certainly see to it that things are going up. Things are very simple. In fact, we live in a world where if an entrepreneur sets up a private limited company that tries to use all tax loopholes, etc., we must create transparency, and where capital investment is also made transparent so that everybody can profit from this.
I have two questions looking toward the future. You mentioned the real estate market, and you said there is a trend towards overheating in the Czech Republic. Is there the risk of a bubble? And how about Austria? Prices are going up continuously. And another question about the Czech Republic. There are going to be elections in October, and populist parties stand the greatest chances. Is that a risk to continuity? Will we have to expect distortions in the Czech Republic? As regards the real estate bubble, I don't really see any such trend. If you look at the development of real income, real disposable income in recent years, and the development of real estate prices, we're far from a bubble. And that applies to the Czech Republic and to Slovakia. The price increases are not alarming. Perhaps, as regards the political situation, one of the two Czech nationals on this panel would like to say something, or would prefer not to say anything on that. What I would say is that the Czech Republic, since its accession to the European Union, was distinguished by one thing: a very volatile party landscape with major fluctuations. There have never been very stable governments, but that did not have much influence on a reasonable and non-populist economic policy. This is something you can't say about many other countries in the region. Well, if I may add a point about the real estate market in the Czech Republic, one of the main reasons for the price increases in the residential segment is that too few new dwellings are being built, so there is an overhang of demand that could, of course, be solved through more building permits being granted. That is one of the main causes. We have another question from Ms. Foster. Please use a microphone. Am I right that out of 100 million impairments, 88 million are accounted for by Accor? So otherwise, impairments would have gone down. And another question, what will the Austrian savings banks have to do in order to improve their cost-income ratio, which is currently above 70? Well, what should I tell the savings banks? Well, I'm not responsible for the cost-income ratio of the savings banks. I'm not in charge of that. None of us is. We're all concerned, of course, but not the shareholders, because the cost-income ratio of the savings banks does not have an impact on our net profit. It's being deconsolidated. And it increases earnings. It reduces costs. So I have whisperers at my side. So risk costs will be lower. But again, that does not impact on the cost-income ratio. Further questions? Yes, please. Well, elections are coming up in Austria as well. Is that relevant to you? We really hope and sincerely hope, and we keep our fingers crossed, that someone wins the election on 15th October. Yesterday we both were talking to Peter Mendel, and he says that he sees a great opportunity of the Olympic Games in 2026 coming to Innsbruck. Or are you referring to another kind of election? Yes, there is another election on the 15th of October. I hope the outcome is a good one. Well, it's easier to talk about the Czech Republic because that's more remote. But perhaps Josef can say something about the Austrian elections on the 15th October. I'm optimistic as well. Well, it appears that this precise and specific answer put an end to the discussion. Now, you have set up provisions for the repayment of interest on the basis of the decision by the Court of Justice of the European Union. So how many customers can expect to be repaid interest? How many customers are those? Thousands of customers. And we've decided to repay interest to everyone. We're going to do that by the end of September, and we've set up provisions for that. A follow-up question. Would you like to make a substantive comment on this court decision? Well, I'd love to do so, but my colleague to my right pointed out to me 3 times today, and he instructed me firmly not to say anything on that. It's a court ruling. Perhaps he would like to say something. It's a court ruling which we accept. of course it's going to have a certain impact. Loans with variable interest rates will not be easier in the future. We have been trying for quite some time to change over to fixed-term loans. Austria was not only the country with the highest percentage of foreign currency loans in Europe, but also the country with the highest volume of variable interest rate loans. In Germany, it's 75 to 25. In Austria, it's the other way round. Now the volume of fixed-term loans will be going up. So if Austrians speculate, they speculate with loans and not in their investments. Well, I wouldn't say so, but they have no investment. Investing money doesn't offer them any opportunities. I wouldn't call it speculation with loans, but Austrians have a trend towards short-term optimization. And that's not always the best of things. It's not always bad either. Well, I have no trend towards short-term press conferences, but if there are no more questions, we wish you a pleasant summer. Thank you for attending this press conference, and thank you for your interest.